कृष्णो रक्षतु मां चराचरगुरुः कृष्णं नमस्ये सदा कृष्णेनैव सुरक्षितोऽहमसकृत् कृष्णाय दत्तं मनः.
Vichara means comparing between the Nitya and Anitya, between the permanent and the impermanent, between the consciousness and the inert, by comparing with the Atma and Anatma. What is the Atma, who is the seer of everything, the knower of everything, and what is the Anatma, which is the object, what is the subject and what is the object. All these Vivekas are constituting of Vichara or introspection. They are all called Vivekas. Nitya Nitya Vastu Viveka, Atma Anatma Viveka, Chit Jada Viveka. Chit means conscious, Jada means inert. Chit Jada Viveka. All these Vicharas, they take our mind and intelligence to a subtler and subtler level to grasp the truth of this one universal soul on which the whole universe, along with the my body mind personality, which is a small speck in the universe, the whole universe is appearing to be in that consciousness. I will give you another example, see whether it works better. Suppose the light is coming from the top, the sunlight coming down, and we have a mirror placed at an angle to the sunlight. The mirror will reflect the sunlight, and by rotating the mirror we can see the light reflected by the mirror. With that we can see various things. Now, is the light really coming from the mirror, or it is coming from the sun? But the mirror, if we have a number of mirrors of different color, even different surface, then according to that the light shown or the object shown by the mirror also will be different. Suppose you have a convex mirror, then the objects will appear differently. The concave mirror, it will appear differently. If the surface there are various striations, waves, the object seen with the light of the mirror will be different. If the mirror is of a color, then we will see the color in the objects. Through the reflected light, whatever objects we see, that will be colored. So that is what is happening, that when the consciousness is manifest through our body-mind personality, depending on our sense organs, the world shown is different. The world shown depends on what our sense organs are. Now, if we think that the light is belonging to the mirror, it is limited by the mirror, it is wrong. Suppose the mirror breaks, then what happens? Does anything happen to the light? The light which is coming originally, it remains as such. Only the mirror is no more able to reflect the light. It is just like the body falling or the body becoming dead. Now I will give you another example. Suppose you rotate the mirror slowly and finally you turn it towards the original light, say towards the sun or so, original light you turn it. Then what happens? Do you find the reflected light anymore anywhere? The reflected light will not be seen at all. The reflected light will be merged with the original incoming light. This is what happens in Samadhi. Normally, when we are sleeping, we are not able to know this original light. But when we are awake, light is not going anywhere. The world is not shown by it. It is revealing its own source. The true light is revealing its own source. But the mirror is perpendicular to the original light, and the reflected light gets merged with the original light. That is our soul getting merged with the Brahman, the consciousness, the original consciousness. I don't know whether it makes things clear, but these examples, they are all from the material world. They will give us a hint how to go into the abstraction and try to grasp the reality which is beyond all constrictions, beyond our habitual ideas about limitation, constriction, etc. The moment the soul or the consciousness gets associated with the body-mind personality, it appears to be small. But truly speaking, the whole universe, which includes my body, mind, personality, is appearing in the consciousness. So it is not exactly that the consciousness is in the body. It is rather the body is in the consciousness, the whole universe is in the consciousness. If we think in this manner, then we will find it easy to grasp the oneness, the transcendental nature, the universality of the soul. Our Shastras give another example, that when the sun is reflected by the rippled water of a lake, there are ripples. So the same sun becomes thousands of suns, millions of suns, because each wave reflects the sun, and the reflected sun appears to be different. That is like the single soul manifesting through infinite number of bodies, and each is having a reflection of the sun. We believe that that is the soul, that the reflection is the soul. But when the wave subsides and it becomes flat, when there is no more waves on the surface, then the sun becomes one. So it is that separate identity of the form of the waves that gives us the idea that the sun is belonging, it is within me, within the wave, and it is a separate from the sun reflected in another wave. That is how we see that the soul in me is different from the soul in another person. But the real soul is not like that. We are always associating the body-mind complex with the soul. So the entire this Sankhya Yoga of Bhagavad Gita, as Krishna explained to Arjuna, will be understood, will be grasped well when we think in terms of these examples. It will help us to grasp the truth. And finally, of course, we have to get into it and get merged into it to have a first-hand realization of the soul. Now you see the revolutionary part of Bhagavad Gita again coming into picture, that after speaking about this immortality of the soul, the highest truth, the highest spiritual truth, at the end what Krishna is telling Arjuna, he says, Tasmat uttishta kaunteya yuddhaya krita nishchayaha. Second chapter, 37th verse and 38th verse. He says, Tato yuddhaya yujyasva naivam papam avapsasi. That means this, the highest truth of spirituality, the spiritual philosophy, is explained in the same manner as the Upanishads will do. In this chapter, most of the shlokas you will find replica in Kathopanishad and other Upanishads also. Similar shlokas are there, exactly same shlokas are also there. But after explaining this highest philosophy, Krishna is using this to make Arjuna fight, not to come away from the world of interactions and get into meditation and contemplation and realize the truth. Arjuna in fact wanted to do it. He said, no, you will not be able to do it. It is not for you. Rather, to get to that first-hand realization, you have to purify your mind, you have to expand your mind, you have to get rid of all the constrictions, all the selfishness, all the selfish ideas your mind suffers from. So the way is to fight. Here the fighting is right in front of you. So see the beautiful way Krishna puts it. After presenting the highest philosophy, normally we will say, everybody who listens to Swamiji or to us, they always say that, oh, then we have to renounce. How can Swamiji, those who are in household, those who are in so many activities, how can we pursue this spiritual goal? This is where you should read Bhagavad Gita. They say, how you are all in sannyasis, this is true for you. But what about us who are involved in all kinds of activities? Sometimes we say that, how big is your family? You may have 2, 4 or maximum 8 or 10 or 12 people in your family. And that too all are either related by blood or by matrimony. Our ashram, how many people are there? Permanent as well as temporarily coming, going. Every day from 50 to 100 people take food in our ashram. And those who are permanently staying also, they have come from all different states, different regions, having different mother tongue, with different educational background, with different family background. They all have different culture. So is our family bigger or your family, our household bigger, ashram hold bigger, or your household bigger? Are we not always involved in activities in our ashram? So it is nothing wrong with the activities, it is only with our mental attitude. The attitude has to be changed and yoga has to be incorporated there. So that is what Krishna is trying to do. After presenting the soul philosophy, the Sankhya Yoga, finally presenting the Sankhya Yoga, Krishna is saying, therefore Krishna, you fight. Tasmat uttishta kaunteya yuddhaya krita nishchaya. With conviction, with nishchaya, with great finality, you should fight. Tato yuddhaya yujyasva naivam papam avapsyasi. And by fighting this war, no papa will touch you. You will not incur any sin at all. Because this war, with this attitude, you are using only to expand your mind, get your mind beyond the constrictions. Papa means constricted mind. So it will help you to get rid of the papa rather than incurring papa. So the whole papa punya definition is changed. Arjuna says that ahovata mahat papam gattum vyavasitavayam, that we are out to commit a great sin. Now here he says, no. If you look at it from the selfish point of view, as you said, yat rajya sukhalovehena, for the greed for enjoying the kingdom, then it is papa. Definitely it is a mahat papa. But when you look at it from this angle, then the papa does not touch you at all. Not only that, you will be able to transcend the papa, you will be able to cross over the constrictions of your mind. So this is the Sankhya Yoga he presented. And then the Bhagavad Gita is so comprehensive it is in its approach, that in the first chapter we have seen that Arjuna is suffering from various concepts gathered from the Karma Kanda. That whatever moral codes, they are all necessary. In the primary level they are all okay. But here, as one becomes a spiritual seeker, one has to get over all those constrictions of the mind. That is what we say, that this spirituality is not restricted by any racial characteristics, religious characteristics or regional characteristics. Even if you are a Hindu, you have to transcend the usual Hindu moral codes, ritualistic codes and various other conceptions to get into the arena of spirituality. We have to go beyond all constrictions, all constricted conceptions. Even the scientist has to go beyond his constrictions developed by only material investigation. He should not forget about the observer of the material world, that the whole material world, all the theories and whatever he has developed, it is all concepts of the mind. The mathematics is the concept of human mind. It is not there in the world. Everything, all the equations we have set up, everything is a concept of the human mind. That is our way of looking at the world. We have to get beyond that also. We have to go beyond the mind and intelligence to reach this supreme truth. Suddenly he introduces a critical analysis of the Karma Kanda of the Vedas, the usual ritualistic section of the Vedas. He says, Yamimam pushpitam vacham pravadantya vipaschitaha vedavadarataah partha nanyadastiti vadinaha kamatmana svargapara janma karma phalapradam kriya vishesha bahulam bhogaishwarya gatim prati bhogaishwarya prasaktanam taya parhita chetasam vyavasayatmika buddhi samadhau na vidhiyate. He says, Yam imam pushpitam vacham pravadantya vipaschitaha vedavadarataah partha nanyadastiti vadinaha kamatmana svargapara janma karma phalapradam kriya vishesha bahulam bhogaishwarya gatim prati. He says that all that is spoken about the various yaga, yajna and rituals and various practices, they are all pushpitam vacham, that they are all flowery language. Shankaracharya says that they are like the palasa flower, that is, there is no fruit seen. They are only in the words. Why are they told? It is said that you do putra kameshti yaga, then you will have children or sons. You do jyotishtoma yoga for attaining some heaven, or you do Vishwajit yaga to attain the greatest of heaven. So many prescriptions are there. But the Vedas are never telling you that you should do it. They are saying that if you do it, then this will happen. If you do it, then that will happen. Like that they have discussed everything. He says that nothing here is mandatory. They are not saying that you must do this yaga or so. They are saying that if you want this, if you desire this, then you do this yaga. So because our mind is guided by desires, we want to fulfill our desires not only in this world, but we want to reserve some comfortable life when our body falls also. So we want to go to Swarga or have a special birth in the Swarga. All these things we want. So according to that they have prescribed that you do this, and all these results, most of these results, what are they? They will happen only after your body falls. So you don't have the opportunity to check, to test, to prove that they are the truth. They are truth. At the same time, you cannot disprove them also. Nobody can say that, well, he died and he has not gone to that Swarga. Whether that Swarga exists or not also nobody can say. So these are all the crafts of the first part of the Vedas, the Karma Kanda of the Vedas. That doesn't mean that we should decry it. They are given for the benefit of the society, because everybody will not understand the truth and they will not seek the truth also, and people's mind are generally haunted by various kinds of desires. If they don't do this yaga and yajna, they will do something wrong to the society, harmful to the society. So they have utilized the desireful mind of the people and how they can be guided to the auspicious goal. When they perform the yaga, yajna, etc., whatever yaga they do, the prescriptions are such that in pursuing the yaga they will undergo a transformation of the mind, provided they follow it properly. All the prescriptions have to be followed to the point, everything in every detail. Otherwise they have threatened that if this goes off, then instead of the Swarga you will be taken to the Naraka. So that threat is also given, so that you are attentive to the prescriptions given by the Vedas. Not only that, during these yagas, yajnas, in between Upanishads also will be chanted. Particularly Kathopanishad is being chanted during Shraddha ceremony, or where the Brahmanas are doing some rituals, there it is to be chanted. So people are flocking to see the yaga because of fulfillment of some desire. But in the process they are exposed to the ultimate truth also, and slowly that will make their mind mature to grasp to take to that ultimate truth also. Not only that, at the end of each yaga, a very important part of yaga is dana. Our Shastras say that whenever the king's coffer will be full, the minister would come and request the king that our coffer has become full, the money has to be distributed to the people. So you must do Ashwamedha yaga or some other yajna. And after the yajna, the whole wealth of the kingdom, of the throne, will be distributed to the people, those who are learned people, those who are performing the yagas, those who are poor, those who are engaged in some other activities where there is not much money. So there was a beautiful economic goal also there, that never the hoarding should go on unlimited. After a certain time it should be distributed to the people, so that the wealth flows to the people. And the good kings used to follow it so much to the detail that Kalidasa is describing one king of the Raghuvamsha in Rama's lineage, that after the yaga is over, a saint has come to see the king, and the king is going to welcome the saint with water in a mritpatra, in a mud vessel, in a water pot made of clay. In a clay pot carrying the water, the king is worshipping the feet of the Mahatma. Generally the kings would do it with a golden vessel. So Kalidasa says that all the gold has gone from the palace. There is no gold. Everything has been distributed, and the king is using the earthen pot to welcome the saint. So this dana was an important, extremely important part of the Karmakanda. After every yaga, this dana is to be performed. The Kathopanishad starts with this, giving us an idea of this. The Kathopanishad, the seeker, is a 7-year-old child, Nachiketa. His father is a great householder. Nachiketa's father, Vajashravas, he is performing a great yaga, Vishwajit yaga, for ensuring, reserving the highest sarga after his death. This is what the Upanishad says. But the Upanishad says that at the end of the yaga, Vajashravas was distributing all wrong things. He was giving the injured cows, the cows who will never yield, never give birth to a calf, who will never calve, the cows who have lost their teats, some cows are lame, some cows have lost their horns, the kind of cows who will be of no use to anybody at all, such cows he was distributing. Seeing that, Nachiketa felt bad. Nachiketa was a small boy, but he was born with enough of samskara, enough of culture. The Upanishad says, Shraddha dawned in Nachiketa's mind. Shraddha avivesha. Shraddha dawned in Nachiketa's mind. What is that Shraddha? Shraddha in Vedanta is regarded as the complete faith in whatever the Guru says and whatever the Shastras say. Shastra Vakya and Guru Vakya. Full faith in that. So Nachiketa had already read, maybe his own father had taught him also, that how the dana should be given. Shriya deyam, Hriya deyam, Lajjaya deyam. There are all these statements are there. Whenever you are gifting anything to anybody, you have to give it with enough of Shritva. What is that? If you are a multimillionaire, you cannot give only 1 rupee to a person you are giving. You have to give according to your whatever you possess, according to that you give. And also you have to give to the person according to the person's status. Whom are you giving? Whether it is commensurate with whatever you are giving or not. Not only that, while giving we have to think whether what I am gifting will be of use to the person or not. Or I am only emptying, I am only clearing my storehouse, that whatever I don't want I am gifting to the people. Such dana is not a good dana at all. Dana should broaden our mind, it should make our mind liberal. So whatever we are giving, we should give it with a sense of renunciation, that even if I have to sacrifice my own comfort for that, I will do it and I will share my wealth with the other. Not only that, in gifting, we have to give according to my own status and the person's own status. It has to be useful to him. While giving, it has to be given with enough of humility. It is not that, oh, I am great, I have the property and I am giving you something and you should feel grateful after taking it. It is not like that. You should be grateful to the person who is receiving. So there are all these prescriptions, there are various other codes of dana, it should be given according to that. So Nachiketa felt that his father is doing an absolutely wrong thing by giving the danas in a wrong manner, giving the wrong gifts to even to the brahmanas and to the priests who have performed the yaga. He was giving the wrong things. And for that his father, instead of going to the heaven, will go to hell. So the Upanishad starts with this observation and it proceeds from there. Nachiketa goes to his father and tries to tell him that, oh father, whom will you gift me? Because gifting the son is so great that whatever nonsense he had gifted earlier, whatever useless materials he had gifted earlier, That can be compensated by gifting the son. So Nachiketa thought that how to relieve my father from this great sin. And he went to his father and said that, "Oh father, to whom will you gift me?" It starts like that. So in following the Vedas, doing rituals and all, they are, although they are using a carrot of Swarga or some comfortable life or some fulfillment of some desire in front, but in the process of doing the yaga, they have designed the yagas in such a manner, those who perform the yaga, going through the process of the yaga and the various ceremonies and whatever is spoken of, even the pathas taking place during the yaga, and finally gifting of everything whatever he has, the mind will become liberal, the mind will go beyond the usual selfish constrictions one is suffering from. By that, there is a possibility that they will take to the knowledge after that and go further beyond. So here it is clearly mentioned that bhogaishvarya prasaktanam taya parhita chetasam, that their mind is actually taken away by the attraction, greed for bhoga, for aishwarya, bhoga. So their mind is full of desires, and to fulfill the desires they are taking to it. Otherwise nobody is asking us to do the yaga. They are taking to the yaga because of their own desire for swarga and for some other benefit in this world also. Because of that they are doing the yaga, and the yagas and the other rituals are trying to put their mind into some discipline, so that the ultimate outcome of the yaga will be, it will discipline the mind of the practitioner. So this discipline is the fundamental point there, and undergoing the discipline the mind will go to a higher level. So he says that vyavasayatmika buddhi samadho na vidhiyate. Such persons who are only thinking of this, the various rewards of the yaga, yajna, etc., their mind will not be settled to the truth. They will not have the true perception of this supreme truth. So one has to go beyond this yaga and yajna. Why is he saying that? He is saying because Arjuna had a tuition of the Karmakanda also, and he knew about this ritualistic part of the Vedas, regarding the Swarga as something very great, regarding the various other things which has been prescribed there as the great thing, and there is nothing beyond. Get an idea that as if there is no truth beyond that. So their mind will get attached to all those comforts and benefits, the rewards of yaga.